In this video, we're going to look at making sure that all of our course content is accessible. And there's a couple of reasons why we're going to do this. First, if you look at PCC's mission statement, you'll see that we advance the region's long-term vitality by delivering accessible quality education to support the academic, professional, and personal development of the diverse students and communities we serve. So accessible here means that any member of our diverse student and community will be able to access our content. In addition to being the mission of PCC, it's also a federal requirement that we provide equally effective and equally integrated educational materials to all of our students, including students with disabilities. And you may well have a student who has an accommodation sign up for your class. And if your instructional materials are not accessible to that student, then usually there's a mad scramble 1 or 2 weeks before the course starts where Disability Services is going to go in and try to create accessible alternatives for any materials in your course that aren't already accessible. And this is not the kind of thing that you want to do at the last moment. You want to actually prepare your course and avoid that sort of crisis that can occur later on. So I'm going to show you some things to look at, and then we're actually going to get a little practice creating accessible content. So the first thing I want to direct you to is pcc.edu/access. And this is the instructional support site for creating accessible online course content. And this is a great site. It has lots of helpful materials on exactly what you need to to create content in an accessible format for a variety of different content. So if you're writing Desire to Learn web pages, here are some guidelines on how to use Desire to Learn to do that, including, in particular, creating the proper heading structure for your document. And we'll talk about that a little later, but some guidelines in general. So use proper heading structure, use properly formatted lists. If you have images and graphics in your course, then provide descriptive alternative text. When you create links, use meaningful text in the link. So for example, if I link to this page, I want to link to PCC's instructional support resources for creating accessible web pages. I don't want to link to click here because this is not text that will be meaningful to somebody who's using a screen reader. If you create tables, then you should make sure that your tables are properly formatted and that they have column headers and that the reading order in the table is the same as the order that you would want the students to see it. Avoid using color by itself to give emphasis to content. Avoid flashing or blinking content. And those are really the top most important ones. So let's go ahead and look at some of our media. And if we go to the content page, we also have this how to use the template. And I want to direct your attention particularly to this document, understanding the template structure. So what is a template? A template is a set of model pages that you can use as starter pages when you're designing your own content, and they already follow the correct accessibility guidelines. In addition, the template has a link to a style, which is a look and feel for the presentation of all content on the page. So for example, there's a top-level header, an H1 header, and it gets this look in the style. It's got a box around it and a drop shadow and this size font, and a level 2 header has this style and an underline under it. And a level 3 header has this style, level 4 header has this style. Block quotes look like this. Ordered lists look like that. Unordered lists look like this, and so on. So all the information about the font that's being used and the size and the layout, the look and feel, this is all part of the style. And the accessibility mavens have chosen the style to help present the information effectively to students with various impairments. So if you use the template and use the style and you follow some of these structured guidelines, your content will work well for students with impairments. Now, in particular, I want to talk a little bit about a screen reader program. So a visually impaired student or a blind student will use a screen reader to read the content of your web pages. And what the screen reader is going to do is basically pronounce all the text that it sees on the screen. Um, but rather than just reading all of the text as one big blob, if the document is structured properly, if it uses the proper headers, so H1 at the top, H2 under that for a section, H3 under that for a subsection, and so on, lists properly formatted as lists, tables properly formatted as tables. If you follow those structure guidelines, the screen reader can actually use that structure information to allow a blind student to navigate through the document. So they can actually get an overview of your page section by section and subsection by subsection. They can skip from section to section. They can read through the information in the table using the structure of the table. The screen reader will help them do that, but only if your page is properly structured. If you don't use proper header structure and you don't use proper tables and you don't use lists that are formatted as lists, if you manually format them by bolding things and putting breaks in your lines and so on so that it looks like a list but it's not actually a list, then the screen reader isn't going to be able to use that structure. It'll just see the content of your page as a big blob of text. Now it will still be able to read that text, but the blind student won't be able to navigate to find the parts that they're interested in. So if you follow these simple guidelines in terms of creating accessible materials and you use the standard template, including the standard styles, you have a big leg up if you have a student who needs an accommodation who signs up for your class.